Go back to Luther, who was a nominalist. What did he do about ethics? And there's a twofold formula that you find running through that whole nominalist tradition and on into some conceptualists. Calvin as well. Right reason and the Word of God. What's right reason? You see, right reason is thinking in terms of consequences. You see. The breakdown of the medieval synthesis with its metaphysically grounded ethic, its natural law ethics, that's why the breakdown of that medieval synthesis bred utilitarianism, consequentialist ethics. And the Word of God, yes, divine command too. So justice is what God says. And my guess is, though I don't have any place in Berkeley that says that he's tuned in enough to the nominalist tradition, you see, which is very, very real, very powerful in the 17th and 18th century, that he would follow along in that tradition. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the case. I was pausing for a moment to ask myself, what about any influence of Cambridge idealism on Berkeley? From what I've read, I don't see much influence of Cambridge idealism on Berkeley. If there were, it would involve more of moral intuitions. You see, an immediate mental awareness of some moral truth. Because the Cambridge Platonists believe in innate ideas, innate moral ideas. But that's, you know, innate moral ideas is so alien to Berkeley's empiricism. No, I don't see that there. Okay, take the second step then, and ask ourselves more directly, all right, what about his argument against materialism? His argument against materialism. And here his attention is turned to the theory of ideas. And he argues for a position that has become known as mentalism. Mentalism. The view that only minds and their ideas exist. Only minds and their ideas. That is to say, what goes on in minds. Only minds and their ideas exist. Oh, and if you want to know how he thinks mind exists, how does he know any mind exists? He'd pull a Descartes on you. I don't know about you, he might say, but I think, therefore I exist. So at least one mind exists. But why only minds and their ideas? Where's his argument for that? What's his argument related to the theory of ideas? Well, basically, you see, his argument is that if ideas are indeed the initial stuff out of which knowledge is composed, sure, simple ideas, compound ideas, related to each other with affirmations or denials, that's the stuff of which knowledge is composed. If that's the case, and if ideas are mental things, mental events, then if the cause must be like the effect, then ideas must have mental causes. So the ideas that flood through my mind must be caused either by my mind or by other mind or minds. Like cause, like effect. Now, right away you see that he has realized the awfully difficult problem Descartes had posed for himself with his mind-body dualism and causal interaction. Yeah, how can bodily changes produce mental changes? How can physical stimuli to the senses producing brain processes cause changes in that immaterial soul? What's the causal connection? And by Berkeley's time, nobody took pineal glands seriously. Moreover, there was a tradition which had developed in Europe known as occasionalism. One representative of which, Malebranche, Frenchman, was himself a metaphysical idealist. Now, occasionalism is the view that there is no direct causal connection between mind and body. But rather, when something physical happens to me, that is the occasion on which God causes a corresponding mental state to occur. And when in my mind I decide to do something, that's simply the occasion on which God causes the physical action to occur. You see? That's a somewhat attractive sort of position if you're groping for some causal explanation. And pineal glands don't do it. You see? And Berkeley seems to be somewhat influenced by that, although obviously his position is somewhat different. You see? But the idea that God is the causal agent. You see, the thing that the occasionalists were trying to do, trying to protect, was a certain strong Calvinist view. That when we say God is almighty, all-powerful, we mean that he has all the power there is, and nobody else has any causal power. Nothing else. Oh. You see. That's why pineal glands don't work. Nothing physical has any causal power. You see. Now, that was the occasionalist attempt to avoid the implications of mechanistic science, in which natural causal powers sufficiently explain all of nature's processes. Matter, this inert, slimy stuff, doesn't have any causal power. God is the one who has power. He's all power. So, somewhat analogously to that, Berkeley is going to say that it's God that is the cause. But in order to get to that, he has to deal more closely with John Locke's theory of ideas. And you'll find that he's working with, I think, at least 3 arguments in this section that runs from 247 to 254 in the anthology. 3 arguments. One is that unperceived things, some things I know not what, unperceived things, unknown, like Locke's unknown substratum. So talk of unknown things has no reference. No point of reference. Doesn't refer to anything. So when you're talking of matter, that substratum that supposedly has primary qualities, the language has no empirical meaning. If it's unknown, it's unknown. And you're not referring to anything when you talk about it. Now, the same, for that matter, is true of force, of space, of time, of argument. The second is the cause-effect, like cause, like effect. But the third argument, a little more subtle, has to do with Locke's doctrine of primary and secondary qualities. Primary and secondary qualities. You see, the thing which bothers Berkeley about it, where Locke is not sufficiently empirical, is that Locke seems to speak of primary and secondary qualities as if in our minds we can separate them and think of them separately. As if you can think of a primary quality without a secondary quality, and a secondary quality without a primary quality. Whereas in actual experience, common sense experience, and Berkeley's always appealing to common sense. In common sense experience, I never perceive colour that is not spatially extended. Even a small blob of blue must have extension. And if a spatial extension were to be perceived at all, it would have to have colour. Something at least which enables me to see it. Not just empty extension. What's empty extension? Empty space. What's that? Nothing. Nothing empirical. So if you never have primary qualities without secondary qualities, or secondary qualities without primary qualities, where does that lead us? Well, Locke has said that secondary qualities are subjective. Yeah. Caused by whatever causes them. Locke has pointed out that secondary qualities can be somewhat relative to all sorts of observation conditions, relative to the perceiver. Secondary qualities. Yeah, it depends if you washed your ears out, how clearly you hear the sound. Depends if you've got your spectacles on, whether you see it clearly. You see. Sure, I can't even see to read the alarm clock when I wake up without my spectacles. It gets worse all the time. One of these days, I guess I just won't bother. But, okay. What you see, secondary quality, is relative to the condition of your sense organs and all sorts of other observation conditions. And therefore, he says, it's subjective. There's no objective correlate. But the same is true of